Hello Nerdaholics, it's Jack here, and we are here just talking about doing our final review and roundup of Jak and Daxter, the Precursor's Legacy, the first of the Jak and Daxter series that we're going to be playing through on the channel. In the background, you'll know what we're doing is we've got the first, rather than having anything like we did with Darksiders 2, having the Crucible in the background, we've got the first part of the series playing again, mainly because I've accidentally deleted the save file. So I was going to use footage of me going around the spider cave trying to find bloody last precursor orb so I could go from 1999 to 2000 and get the trophy, but fuck it in its ass. Seriously, I'm not going to get over that. I'm really not. You have no idea how much it pains me. Right, so moving swiftly on. Let's talk about gameplay first. Let's talk about the gameplay mechanics for this game. I'm going to be a lot fairer with this than I was with Darksiders, or have been with some of the things in Skyrim. Or I will be with Skyrim, I should say. Because this game is from the PlayStation 2 era. Now, that doesn't give it a free pass for the gameplay working or not working. However, us being now sort of in current year, it means we're a lot more used to having a lot more conveniences and a lot more refined and perfected technology when it comes to certain things and how gameplay operates. You know, things like let's take auto aiming for example, because this is probably a perfect example. When you're using the yellow eco to shoot fireballs, it just goes in a straight line. Sometimes it does a little wisp at the end to hit targets, or it wisps at the very beginning so it hits the target that is kind of there. It's a very off-balanced system in terms of auto aiming, because sometimes it just doesn't auto aim. Now it's kind of, you could argue that's part of the mechanics, you could argue it's not, and either way that's kind of the issue. It's kind of, it doesn't do it one way or the other. Whereas if you were to take kind of like any sort of modern third-person shooter, any sort of modern third-person shooter generally gives you a bit of auto-aim or a lock-on feature or something like that to kind of counterbalance it. Now again, like I said, PlayStation 2 era, not going to be too critical of that sort of thing, but you can kind of see the difference and sort of some of the issues that you have with it. In terms of sort of the actual platforming, it all is actually very, very smooth. It played really well. All the 99% of the mistakes that were made were my own, and I don't fault the game for that. I can't, because it's not the game's fault. It's my fault. If I was better, it wouldn't have happened. But then with practice, it's kind of like I got better with it, with those certain bits and pieces. It kind of takes a bit of repetition, a bit of practice, and you can do these jumps and these sort of twists and turns and things that you need to do to make what you need to do perfect. The only other thing I would say that was a bit of a problem is I did have a few problems with the controls. Again, I think this is a change from it coming from the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 4, rather than there being any significant issue with how it was all put together. In terms of things like the PlayStation 2 had a start button that was obviously not the touchpad, because that's the touchpad is what you're using to kind of stop and start the game to go into the pause menu. It's kind of little things like that. Again, they're not significant issues really. It's more my ignorance and my inability to remember what I'm supposed to be doing. That's more of an issue rather than anything else. But it's kind of, it is there as a niggle. It was there as something that was a bit of a problem, and it did kind of slow down things every now and again. But that said, like I said, running, jumping, climbing trees, all that stuff, that was all absolutely fine. It all worked very well. Now, graphics and aesthetics is the next point I have in my little notes here, is that this game has actually aged really, really well. And a lot better than I originally thought it would. Because this game is how many years old now? It's over a decade old, well over a decade old. Like I said, PlayStation 2 era. So looking like what, 2000 2003 to 2008 sort of time, I think, if memory serves. But even then, it's like, okay, you can see that it's obviously not as polished and refined as it changes, because this is early PlayStation 2. And when you see Jak 2 Next, it's kind of, you'll see there's a lot more sort of some of those more angular lines in faces and in bits and pieces. It's kind of all smoothed out a bit more. You can kind of tell this is the transition period for Naughty Dog between Crash Bandicoot, well, and sort of Uncharted, and well, the rest of the Jak and Daxter series, really. But even so, I really like the aesthetic, and I think it's aged really, really well. And I see no real problems with it. It's kind of, if you were to put this game on for someone today, I mean, they could enjoy the graphics and look at it. They might think it's just like a low budget indie thing, rather than like a more professionally made big studio game, because it's kind of, that's how well it's aged. It's aged really well. I know that kind of sounds a bit like an insult, but it's not. It's, you know, it's still really good. Now, let's talk about the story. The story is very bare bones, because this game isn't. There's a lot. This game kind of this game works very well for theory crafting when you look at the series as a whole. But ultimately, this individual game, as its own standalone thing, doesn't have a lot of story. It's literally a case of Jak's friend Daxter got turned into an Ottsel. He needs to go and find the one person who can help change him back. On their journey to get there, they've got to collect power cells by doing random jobs and random tasks and random little achievements across various areas on their travels north. Once they get there, they find out that the person who needs to help them, Gul Acheron, has been twisted by Dark Eco and is now a bad guy, and is trying to raise armies of lurkers to take over the world and spew lots of Dark Eco out on the world. Now, and on their way, obviously, there's lots of trials and challenges and, you know, bits and pieces and lurkers and everything else. But there's not really that much to unpack. There's no sort of twists and turns. There's no secret reveal that Gul Acheron is Jak's father or anything like that. You know, it's just, it is just simple. Like I said, this is kind of like I said during the playthrough, it's kind of, it feels like, this feels like Disney in its prime. It's a simple story, done well, with a nice aesthetic. You know, you take something like, it's no more complicated than anything like that. So if you can get on with that, it's great. You'll have a lovely time. The areas of the game specifically, because this is kind of what you're really going through the game for the collecting and going through all these various areas. And the various areas you've got, and all of them, and things like Geyser Rock, which is on the screen now, is obviously just your basic training area. A lot of these areas are fairly well thought. I personally think they're relatively well thought out. They're not overly complex. There's no deep secret hidden sections to any of them, really. I mean, all of it is fairly openly laid out. So, with enough, there's a few places as you get further on, particularly in sort of Snowy Mountain, Spider Cave. So basically from the volcanic crater sort of area, there's a few bits and pieces that are kind of hidden away, that they're not too difficult to find if you're just keeping your eyes open, except for that last fucking Precursor orb in the Spider Cave. But it's open enough that you can find your way around, and it's not too much of a problem. You know, you can find what you need to find. You know, you can find the secret areas. You've just got to be either practiced enough to do the jumps, or eagle-eyed enough to notice where, like, the extra doors are, or the little sneaky little hideaway sections are. So let's pick up an example of this. The Snowy Mountain, the area to get one of the power cells that reactivates all the yellow the yellow eco vents. The way into it is a small cave behind a few trees. Now, it's easily missed because the cave opening isn't very wide and there's quite a few trees in front of it. Now you know that there's something down there because you can go above the area where the eco vent is and see the eco vent through the ice. So you know there's something down there, you know there's got to be an entrance around there somewhere, so you know you're looking for something. And it's not like there's so many trees in that sort of area blocking anything else. You're not going through like a woods or anything, so you can find it. It's discreet, but it's still relatively obvious, if that makes sense. So it's you've got bits and pieces like that, and something like compare that to say Forbidden Jungle, one of the first sections you go to. I think in fact it's the first section I go to in the playthrough, after sort of getting through Geyser Rock and a little wander around Sandover Village. But ultimately, there's nothing hidden in that. It's like the only thing you could argue is that is debatably hidden is the power cell at the end of the river. But even then, again, just being a little bit eagle-eyed, you can see that, and it's none of this stuff is too difficult to find or too difficult to deal with. So it's like I said, it's a good collectathon, but you just got to keep your eyes open for a few bits and pieces just to make sure you do get everything. That's all. And here you go with Geyser Rock there. Those three Precursor orbs being down there. So 5 Precursor orbs, 6 Precursor orbs. I can't count. If you didn't know that they were down there, you could miss them. But it's not exactly a secret hidden area because it's obvious enough that you can go down there if you wanted to. You just got to look, And that's kind of the thing. The game kind of rewards you with finding everything. I think the only sort of thing that was a little bit tricky is always that 101st power cell, which is the one that you find in the volcanic crater, the one in the sealed lockbox. They have to blow up with the yellow eco. But that means you've got to get the yellow eco from the closest vent, run all the way back to the beginning of the spider cave, get out of the spider cave to the part of the volcanic crater, aim and fire before you run out of the eco. Again, so it's not difficult to get hold of. It's not difficult to get hold of. You've got to just practice it and get it right. That's all. In terms, there's not really a lot. Again, like I said, there's not a lot of sort of things you can do with. There's not a lot deep. There's no sort of deep hidden lore to any of these places. I mean, the Lost Precursor city is relatively interesting in terms of the grand scheme of things because, as we will discuss later, and bear this in mind when we get to the end of Jak 3 and we have quote unquote all the information we're going to get about the Precursors, we can talk about the Lost Precursor city and how that place makes no real sense. And I don't mean the fact that it's filled up with lurkers or anything. It's just you'll understand when we talk about that later, but we won't do that yet because of spoilers. Just in case there's anyone out there who's interested in buying these games and playing them, they're readily available on the PlayStation Network and through various second-hand stores, or you can probably buy it brand new off Amazon still. They're probably still around. Yeah. So, next we're going on to characters. Because like I said, there's not a lot to unpack with story. It's just, this is what it is. It's still very early days of storytelling in video games, and the main point of this sort of game is more to do like the collectathon. You're there to do the jumps, to do the spin kicks, and to sort of do all the little tricks with the eco to kind of get yourself from one end of the level to the other and collect everything. It's not about a deep and engaging story at this point. I will preface that. So we're moving on to characters next. So the first character is Jak. Jak has no character in this game. He is almost a literal stand-in for the player. Now there are a few little subtle bits and pieces here and there of him, obviously enjoying Daxter's company and them being good friends. You can see through a few facial expressions. He's obviously got a bit of a crush on Kira. Again, you see that through facial expressions. He has no lines in this game at all, other than a "yeah" or "ah." I think that was a good impression of him. When he's doing the kicks, the punches, and falling down holes. That's the only time you ever hear anything from him, really. And it's just sort of grunts and screams. It's not really anything particular. But you can tell that he's... Now, obviously, if you kind of metagame this a little bit and be like, well, he is doing all these things because we're making him do all these things, then you could argue that he's obviously very brave and, courageous fellow. But we're not going to go down quite that route because we're not going to metagame it yet. At this point, he is more of a player stand-in. but there's a little bit of characterization there, but he doesn't really have a character yet. It's all very subtle. And considering how much story there is to this game, it's probably not strong enough to call it a real character stuff just yet. And little stuff like that you saw on the screen is he just kind of did a little shrug for Daxter. It's like, sorry mate, you're my friend. I didn't mean to I didn't mean to not catch you, but yeah, it's that sort of thing. Daxter. Okay, Daxter's more of the star of the show when it comes to sort of characters for this. He is the little orange Otzel. He is the one who's talking. He is the one who's kind of just giving you all the funny jokes and giving you all the quips, and he's basically giving you all little bit, not quite hints, but he's kind of giving you little bits and pieces like to help you go through the game if you're kind of getting stuck in a few places, which is always kind of nice. To have that sort of bits and pieces there. I mean, as a character, he's obviously he is obviously like a little bit of a coward. He is obviously a little bit sort of sarky. I wouldn't call him selfish or anything like that, because he does have he is selfish unless it's important, because he's fairly selfless at big important moments of the game, as you saw in the finale. In the final boss fight. You've got the light eco there. He was like, well, I could take it and go back to being myself, or we can use it to destroy the big robot. And it's like, okay, he kind of, you could argue he grudgingly does it, but he still does it. And that to me at least seems that he's trying, or he is still relatively selfless. And you see more of that as the games go on. It's kind of like he's a little bit sort of sarky and selfish, but only so much as it's kind of about his direct safety. But versus the whole world, he'll come through. He does, and that's always a good thing to see. Samos and Kira, these two. It's not so much to talk about with them, because again, at this point, the game isn't as it hasn't really fully fleshed out the characters. It's kind of, you can kind of tell that sort of like they are people who give you hints as to where to get power cells. Kira is obviously very technically minded. She makes machines. She can operate. She operated the Blue Sage's blue laser cannon that lifts rocks with only a quick stage, and she knew you had to stick just power. Admittedly, all she had to do was stick power cells in it, but then again, it's something she'd never seen before, and she knows how to work it. So she's very technically minded, which is a great thing. Samos the Sage being a grumpy old man, which is just more for the purposes of humour rather than anything else. I think what you've got the nice startings of a team, and it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if Jak and Daxter continued along this sort of line of collectathonning rather than going the way it did in Jak 2. Again, we'll talk about that when we get into Jak 2. But yeah, they're good. So far, all the characters are good. I can't argue any of them are great just from the basis of this game, because with the exception of Daxter, none of them really get that fleshed out or get really that sort of any sort of real personality given to them. I'm not even going to touch on sort of little side characters like the geologist or the mayor or the bird lady or the warrior or the artist or anything like that, because they are literally just there for you to give you a mission. You give them precursor orbs, it's done, and that's it. Gull and Maya Acheron. I don't know why there's two of them. I don't. Because Gull Acheron is the sage of Dark Eco, and then, but it's him and his sister who are then going to try and destroy the world with Dark Eco, or change the world with Dark Eco. The problem with them is they get introduced in the opening cutscenes talking to the lurkers, but you don't know who they are at that point. And then it's when you get to, I believe, the Red Sage's lab in the volcanic crater, that's when you are reintroduced to them again. And then you don't see them again until the final boss, just before the final boss, and then they do the final boss. It's kind of, and all they really actually reveal over the course of all their over all the time is they want to unleash Dark Eco upon the world, so they're very one-note bad guys. But this could easily have been just one character. This could be just Gul Acheron or Maya Acheron, either one. It wouldn't have mattered, because all the lines that were said by one could easily have been given to the other. I think the only thing you would have to change is like Daxter makes a joke about beauty. Is like Maya says you don't know the beauty of Dark Eco, and Daxter's like, yeah, have you seen yourself in the mirror lately? It's like you know, but even then you could still have that go with the other one, go with the other of Gul rather than Maya. It's like you could still do all that. And it's just a bit. It feels like they've turned it into two characters when it doesn't need to be. Again, this to me. I'm going to stop talking about them now because they're very one note. But then what I will say is it strikes me that there was a plan for a sequel, and then, well, after Jak and Daxter came out, Ratchet and Clank came out very soon afterwards. I think the same year, but like 6 months later or something like that. It was something like that. A very, very close time frame. It's obviously not that one copied the other or anything, and clearly not if you play the first Ratchet and Clank game, other than the fact that they're both platform and collectathons. But beyond that, it's kind of, they're still very different. Point is, Jak and Daxter wanted to distinguish itself, which is why it did so many changes for Jak 2. But it does feel that if that hadn't happened, if Ratchet and Clank hadn't happened, or they hadn't changed their tactics and kept going, it does feel as if there was going to be a plan for what they're going to do next. I don't know what that would have been. I don't think they ever really kind of got into a story planning stages with that, because they kind of left it a little bit open-ended that Gul and Maya could come back because of how they were defeated in the end. But as it stands, it's kind of, like I said, it's a little bit open at a point where it's like, I don't really know what to say or do about that, because it's kind of, I don't want to sort of speculate too much, but it feels like there was a plan and they didn't really do it. And that's all I'll say on that. Okay, the last sort of characters would be, well, there's Lurkers and Precursors to talk about for that. We'll talk about Lurkers first. Lurkers are they are just generic monsters. And again, I think this fits into the sort of this world has a very sort of, we are happy elf people doing elven-y things without being actual elves. Or maybe they are actual elves, I don't know. But they're elf-like people, and Lurkers are kind of like orcs. Sort of tying this back to Lord of the Rings a little bit. Always tie everything to Lord of the Rings, you must always do that. But no, it's like they're happy little elf people doing the happy little elf things. And Lurkers are just kind of monsters that roam the wilds, like lurker snakes, lurker sharks, like lurker plants. There's lots of weirdness out there, but the Lurkers, none of them speak. Again, other than to kind of grunt and go, "Rrr," and then chase you down. They obviously have like a sentience, because they have lurker technology. They make things. The dirigible in the boggy swamp is a lurker dirigible. The lurkers made it, so it's kind of, you know that they've got some sort of intelligence. They are maybe not like academically the smartest, but they're not exactly stupid either. And that's just kind of the whole thing for it. You know, it's interesting to see how that all works out. Now, the Precursors. We're going to talk about them a lot when we get to the third game and our little roundup of that. For the very obvious reason that we have all the information at the end of that game that we're going to get about Precursors. All I'll say now is it's kind of, the mystery of them is kind of, it's intriguing, but this game, I don't get why it's called the Precursors Legacy so much. You could have just called this game Jak and Daxter and had the exact same game, and it would not have changed a single thing. Because to call it the Precursors Legacy, if I had to speculate, I'd say it's called the Precursors Legacy because the legacy is about what they've left behind, including the eco and all the various sort of bits of scrappy technology they've left all over the place. But again, nothing's really done with it other than the fact that, you know, again, story's not the strongest point for this game, so I can't really argue that that they didn't do this well, but I can't argue too much that they did this badly. And again, I'm being probably more generous than I should be, because it's PlayStation 2 era, and, you know, it's like, you know, argue the story from a Mario game, you know, from back on the first NES. You know, the story is save the princess, Bowser's kidnapped her, done. You know, there is almost nothing more to it than that. You could make stuff up to make it work more, but you can't. You can't really. But it's kind of like, the title of the game doesn't quite allude to why it is the way it is. So we're just kind of focusing on that there. Now, one thing I will say about the Precursors is them and their relationship to eco. It's interesting because all the eco events are Precursor technology, which implies that eco is a natural sort of substance, but is a natural energy, but it's kind of, is it that much of a natural energy? Because if it's something that's only connected through Precursor technology, it's like people can channel it, but then is that something special to do with Precursors or Precursor lineage, or is that to do with just how technology works and how the eco events work? Could more people channel eco if they knew what they were doing? You know, it's like the Force and how it's supposed to be in Star Wars, so that anyone can do it with training and practice. You know, you just got to go and do the training and the practice. Whereas it's kind of, it's a strange one. But eco, is it that much of is it a natural thing? Is it a natural energy source? Is it something that's produced from the planet, like Mako energy in Final Fantasy VII, where it's kind of like, you know, the lifeblood of the planet, or the spiritual energy of everyone who lives and dies going back into the planet, but then just being turned and used for other things, which would put a fairly dark twist on the Precursors if that's the case. Actually, the planet produces energy coming away from those who live and die, and it goes back in, and it's not very nice. Not very nice indeed. So, as a roundup, this game was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I love the aesthetic. It's kind of, I think it holds up very, very well, considering it's been out for. Actually, if I ever, it's going to bother me. I'm going to quickly look this up, because this game's been out for a long while. Obviously, I reckon we are looking at about 15 years. I should have done this before I started making the video. I should have done, but it's fine. Let's just have a quick look. Wikipedia. Jak and Daxter PS2. See when it first came out. I need you to give me details. First Naughty Dog game on the PlayStation 2. December 7th, 2001. So this game is 17 years old. Or will be 17 years old in a few months. That is actually quite interesting, especially when you consider, you know, it still holds up really well. And that's it, isn't it? It's like, interesting. Very, very interesting. So, where was I? Yeah, it's a very fun game. And if you have the ability all the time to go and play it, I would recommend that you do, because I had a lot of fun with it. I hope you guys had a lot of fun watching me play it, and hopefully when the fails video comes out, you can have a lot of fun watching me fail at it as well. Because, you know, you've got to have a laugh at that every now and again. You got to, because it's always fun to watch fails every now and again. But yeah, it's a fun game. Not too much in the way of story, not too much in the way of anything else that's going on with it, really. But it does provide a solid foundation for what you're going to next. And considering the era this came out in, when 3D games were only really just kind of getting their start, and 3D games hadn't been, well, N64 came out, N64 and PlayStation were the first 3D game consoles, really, but they weren't going for a massive long time before we got to PlayStation 2 and GameCube sort of times. But you know, it's a nice little throwback to that sort of simpler time, and yeah. So I think that just about says everything that we can really talk about for now until we hit end of Jak and Daxter, to hit the end of Jak 2. Thank you for watching the videos. If you have been, if you've enjoyed the series, please thumbs up, like and subscribe, all that usual stuff. I believe Sean is still churning out Spider-Man whenever he can, so please be patient with him on that, and please do keep watching because it's a lot of fun. I'm finished, well, I've honestly finished this. I'm moving on to Jak 2 next. We'll just keep going with that, and we'll see what happens with other games and Skyrim and everything else in the future. So, enjoy yourselves, and have a nice afternoon.